Change Enablement Series. Chapter 3. Systems. Change. Success depends on people. While tools manage and control our information more effectively, a successful implementation ultimately depends on how well our people understand, adopt, and integrate the tool into their daily work. That's why ReVisionz's implementation approach puts people at the center by focusing on awareness, role-based training, and the support needed to build confidence and enable lasting change. Yet even with strong planning and well-designed programs, the real test of change begins once new tools and processes move from project plans into everyday operations. Tools may be in place, processes documented, and decisions made, but people are still figuring out what actually changed for them and what is now expected day to day. This is usually when confidence drops and old ways of working return. This article is part of our Change Enablement series, and it builds directly on the ideas introduced in the first two chapters. Chapter 1 focused on the human factors that slow transformation when people are not supported through change. Chapter 2 explored why change enablement must be designed into a project from the start rather than added once delivery is underway. This chapter moves the focus to the role people play in sustaining change once execution begins. The sections that follow look at stakeholder engagement and human impact as practical foundations instead of supporting activities. When people are involved early and their concerns are understood, risk is visible sooner and ownership develops naturally as work evolves. At ReVisionz, this people-centered approach shapes how we guide organizations through transformation, so change does not stop at the time of delivery but continues into everyday practice. Why stakeholder engagement anchors successful change. Stakeholder engagement provides grounded insight into how work truly happens. End users can see practical problems that rarely surface in design sessions. When those insights are captured early, the project is able to adjust before friction occurs. Engagement also protects momentum. Many projects begin with strong kickoff messaging, then fall quiet while technical work progresses. During that silence, teams lose sight of the project objectives, and by the time go-live arrives, the change feels abrupt rather than expected. Consistent engagement keeps the change visible and connected to daily work, which helps sustain forward motion. There is also an ownership effect that emerges when engagement is done well. Giving stakeholders a structured way to raise concerns and contribute ideas signals that their experience matters. Even when not every suggestion is adopted, the act of participation builds accountability and shared responsibility for outcomes. These benefits become clearer when engagement is treated as ongoing rather than episodic, which leads directly into how resistance is surfaced and addressed. How proactive engagement reduces resistance and builds ownership. Resistance is usually a response to uncertainty rather than opposition. When engagement is proactive, concerns surface while there is still time to respond. This allows project teams to listen, clarify, and adapt rather than react after resistance has taken hold. Early engagement also reveals realities that leadership may not see, such as cultural sensitivities, informal practices, and operational shortcuts. Addressing these realities through targeted communication and training reduces the need for corrective action later. Hidden dependencies often emerge through this process as well. These may include reliance on another group, timing assumptions, or manual steps that bridge system gaps. When these dependencies are identified early, the leaders can successfully design a project around them. Once these dynamics are understood, the next challenge becomes identifying who is affected most and how deeply their work will change. Mapping the human impact. Identifying who is most affected. Understanding human impact starts with process analysis. Without examining how work flows today and how it will change, organizations risk overlooking entire groups. For example, a responsibility that exists today could shift or disappear. ReVisionz uses process impact analysis to surface these shifts. This work highlights where responsibilities move, where decision points change, and where the largest adjustments in execution will occur. It also exposes system touchpoints and workflow changes that alter how people interact with information. Tools that clarify influence and readiness. To make insights actionable, ReVisionz applies structured stakeholder analysis tools such as RACI matrices, influence and interest grids, impact assessments, and persona views. These frameworks help visualize who is affected, how strongly, and where engagement effort should be focused. Rather than treating stakeholders as a single audience, this approach recognizes varying levels of influence, readiness, and exposure to change. Shaping communication, training, and engagement. Once impact is clear, communication can become targeted. Training aligns to roles within end-to-end processes rather than job titles, and engagement strategies focus on groups with the greatest exposure and influence. This also enables more meaningful readiness assessments. Instead of relying on general sentiment, readiness can be evaluated by group, which allows support to be directed where it's most needed without overlooking less visible roles. Preparing and guiding adoption. Moving from awareness to ownership. Awareness alone does not change behavior. Ownership develops when people understand the context for change, build confidence in new ways of working, and feel accountable for outcomes. ReVisionz supports this progression by pairing clear messaging with hands-on capability building. Training focuses on real-work scenarios rather than abstract system features. Also, leadership reinforcement helps translate expectations into daily decisions, making the change tangible. Embedding. Adoption into daily work. Adoption weakens when learning is treated as a one-time event. ReVisionz designs adoption to live inside daily routines through methods such as on-the-job coaching, role-based practices, job aids, and quick reference materials that support just-in-time learning. Learning is most effective when it aligns with how people work, arriving close to execution so it builds retention and confidence, instead of fading too early or creating frustration too late. ReVisionz also focuses on longer-term sustainment training through computer-based learning strategies to enable our clients to be set up for future onboarding and retention. What strong engagement changes in practice? Projects that involve end users early and maintain two-way communication see measurable differences at go-live. Confidence is higher, resistance is lower, and morale improves because people feel prepared rather than surprised. Feedback loops also allow teams to adjust throughout delivery, instead of relying on late-stage fixes. Measuring success beyond attendance. Attendance does not indicate readiness. That's why ReVisionz looks for evidence that new behaviors are taking hold. What signals adoption? We assess whether people are reverting to old methods, following new processes, and using tools with confidence. These behavioral signals provide insight into whether the change is stabilizing or at risk. Assessing capability. Across roles. Capability varies by role. For instance, a casual user requires different proficiency than a system administrator. ReVisionz uses role-specific assessments, hands-on exercises, adoption surveys, and self-assessments where appropriate. On-the-job performance provides additional confirmation of readiness. These methods are sometimes underestimated because they do not resemble traditional deliverables. In practice, they provide the most reliable indication of whether the organization can sustain the change. Linking adoption to business performance. Adoption activities are tied to business outcomes by identifying the behaviors that drive performance, then tracking whether those behaviors are present. When KP such as uptime, utilization, or safety are defined early, shifts in performance can signal adoption challenges before they escalate. This creates an early warning system that allows intervention while the project is still in motion. Carrying change forward. Change holds when people are engaged early and supported as their work changes. This chapter explored how stakeholder involvement, human impact mapping, and adoption-focused measures reduce risk, build ownership, and sustain momentum beyond go live. When learning aligns with execution and readiness is measured through real behaviors, organizations can have clear insight into how change is actually taking hold. These practices move adoption from something hoped for at the end of a project to something tangible and manageable throughout delivery. At ReVisionz, we embed this people-centered approach into governance and execution, so change becomes repeatable instead of reactive. The result is transformation that carries into daily work rather than stalling after implementation. If your organization is preparing for its next initiative and wants adoption to last well beyond delivery, we can guide your team in building the structure that brings people along with confidence.